Clea is Clair Obscur Expedition 33's most misunderstood character. Many see her as uncaring and cruel, and while she does have moments of cruelty, her grief is just as real as the rest of the Desandra family. But while they are grieving with escapism and denial, Clea is grieving in another way, the only way that she has known her entire life. Clea is the eldest child of the Desandra family, and from a young age she has always been a very skilled painter and sculptor. When her and her younger brother Verso were kids, they would escape to his canvas. Here they both would paint and create this beautiful world. They'd create the gesturals and paintings of their own dogs, Monoko and Noko. They'd also paint Esquier and Francois, who would eventually become very close to Clea. Clea and Francois would even sing and dance together during their time within the canvas. Here, Verso and Clea made many happy memories. Inside the canvas, she could also practice her painting and sculpture and her endless pursuit at perfection. When she was young, her father Renoir asked her about mortality, and her answer surprised him. She wasn't scared of death itself. She was sad because there are more works of art than she'd ever be able to see in her lifetime. So many fables from around the world that she'd never be able to collect, to bring to life in her workshop. All the beauty in the world she'd never get to experience. That saddened her. Renoir encouraged his children to believe that their dreams were within their grasp, but Clea proved him a liar. In this pursuit of art, Clea was most like her father. And despite her dreams being impossible to achieve, it didn't stop Clea from trying. Even within the canvas, the Flying Manor would eventually become Clea's second home, a place where she could practice her art, but also a place where Verso and Clea played. The two created many happy memories within the canvas, but their younger sister Alicia wasn't really interested in the painting. Instead, she was lost in her own world within her books. While the details are unknown, somehow the writers, a group of people who were in opposition to the painters, would target the Desandra family. Aline was head of the Painters' Council, and so they used Aline's daughter against them. Alicia's trust enabled the writers to get close enough to start a fire at the Desandra family home. On December 33, 1905, Verso would die saving his little sister. This would be the catalyst for the destruction of the Desandra family, and each family member would descend into their own grief. For Clea, she was both mad at her brother for his sacrifice, but also loved him for saving her sister. She felt great responsibility and took his death hard, and she struggled with her anger surrounding the entire situation. Aline, desperate to be with her son, would find the canvas that Verso and Clea spent their childhood within, and here Aline would try to escape her grief, painting a mirrored version of her family, making them immortal so she couldn't lose them again. Shortly after, Renoir would follow Aline in attempts to get her to leave. Initially, Clea wasn't too worried, for her father and mother had previously spent more time than this within their canvases, but eventually she realized her father needed help. So she entered the canvas. During the height of Renoir and Aline's fighting, they caused the fracture. Aline would trap Renoir under the monolith, and she would remain up top. Their standstill showed no sign of ending anytime soon. But this event confused the people of Lumiere and Aline's painted family. Painted Renoir and Painted Verso were in Lumiere when the fracture happened, and the original Expedition Zero was actually a search and rescue mission. They were looking for Aline and survivors of the fracture. It was not originally a mission to kill the paintress. But when Expedition Zero reached the barrier of the monolith, Clea was already there. Here she told them the truth of their world and their existence, but they wouldn't take her side. And she knew that if they continued and spoke to Aline, they would side with Aline. When they wouldn't leave, she tried to kill them instead. Realizing they were immortal as Aline had created them, she couldn't kill Painted Verso or Painted Renoir. but she did kill the rest of Expedition Zero. The timeline of Clea entering the canvas is a little unclear, but she visited the canvas world at least 3 times to help Renoir, desperate for help dealing with the riders. At one point, she would find the painted version of herself that her mother created, and she would paint over it, which only the most skilled painters could do. Clea hated whatever her mother had depicted her as, so she turned painted Clea into a Nevron-making factory, stuck forever making Nevrons to help Renoir get Aline out of the canvas. During Renoir's time within the canvas, he also painted a portrait of Clea. It was called the Hauler. The Hauler is in the old city of Lumiere, and you can see it and its destruction. He painted a long-haired woman with the city on her back, shouldering the weight of everyone. This is how he saw his daughter. This depiction of Clea also upset her, so she used the people of Lumiere to have it destroyed. Aline's painted Clea had lived her life within the canvas world, and during that time she had fallen in love with a man named Simon. After Clea had turned painted Clea into a Nevron factory, she pretended to be painted Clea to trick Simon. Then she granted Simon the power to destroy the Axons and to be able to enter the monolith. Simon realized Clea's deception too late, and by this time he had already did exactly as Clea asked. The Axon of Clea, the Hauler, was destroyed, and he would successfully reach the monolith and breach the barrier, finding his way to Aline. But Clea's plan would only work against her, because in the end, when Simon met the real paintress, Aline showed Simon how he could save painted Clea, and so Simon joined her side. With Aline's help and manipulation, Simon descended to the bottom of the monolith. Here, Aline had sealed Renoir away. Simon tried to kill Renoir but failed, so then Renoir sealed him off in the abyss, where Simon would eventually lose his mind. With her plan using Simon against Aline failing, Clea would resort to other methods. Years later in the canvas world, she would return and try to recruit Painted Verso on her side. And once again, years later, and 16 years prior to the events of the game, Clea would re-enter the canvas following after Alicia. After Alicia was reborn as Maëlle, Clea would ask Painted Verso to watch over their sister. Here, she would be safe from the war that Clea was fighting outside the canvas. And this brings us to the current events of the game, where Clea is still trying to help make both of her parents leave the canvas, while she continues to hunt down the riders on her own. Inside the canvas, Painted Clea was still painting those Nevrons. When Expedition 33 and Verso find her and fight her, the Painted Clea seeps through Clea's creation, and she realized what she had become after seeing her brother again. Unable to handle the truth of her existence, she forced her Nevron creations to kill her immediately, to end her suffering. Expedition 33 can also meet Simon, where he too can be defeated, and finally laid to rest. In the end, we only see Clea in one of the ending epilogues, the ending where the canvas world is destroyed, and the Desandra family can hopefully move past Verso's death and begin to heal. In this ending, she is still the same as she was before, focused on what she has to do and unwilling to show emotion in front of her family. For even here, Clea continues to shoulder the weight of her grief alone. Clea is the character who actually changes the least throughout the game, alongside Renoir, which makes sense considering the two are very similar. They are both dedicated to their families and their self-appointed missions. While Renoir fights to save his family inside the canvas, Clea fights to save her family outside. People look at the two very differently because Renoir expresses his grief with his actions and his words, while Clea expresses it through her actions alone. But the two are the same, and they are both absolutely dedicated to saving their family. But I actually think Clea is most like her mother. When Alicia is exploring the house in the flashback, she points out the painting that she was allowed to hang on the wall, the one single painting that Aline deemed worthy enough. Meanwhile, the rest of the house is covered by Verso and Clea's canvases. Her mother was also a perfectionist, accepting nothing less than the best. This is why both Aline and Clea were the most skilled painters in the entire family. But Clea was able to surpass her mother, because as the situation of Verso's death shows, Aline couldn't handle her grief or control herself. Meanwhile, Clea has been able to control her emotions, turning them into anger and purpose, with that purpose be to hunt down the riders. The two are very similar, but I think Clea has seen the mistakes that her mother has made and has learned not to repeat them. We also know that this entire situation isn't the first time that something like this has happened. When Maëlle speaks to the fading woman of Clea, she tells Maëlle that their parents need to have a hard conversation that neither of them are adult enough for. She recognizes that their uncontrolled grief is hurting everyone and each other, and they're better off apart than together right now. And instead of dealing with it, they're doing what they're doing right now, and they pull people into their messes. It's clear that Clea is resentful at her parents' actions, understandably so. But her kindness towards her sister and love, tough love, is shown in this conversation. She tells Maëlle, "Don't let their messes become yours. The only thing you owe them is to live a life you enjoy." This is Clea's tough love, and she's right. She also tells Maëlle that she'll handle the situation, which is what Clea knows to do. In her own way, shouldering everything is how she is helping Maëlle, how she is showing that she cares. I think in a way she takes on the responsibilities of her parents because they were put on her when she was young, and she doesn't want Maëlle to experience that. I think this is why she'll also accept Maëlle's choice if she does choose to stay within the canvas world. She wants Maëlle to be able to be in control of her life. So she helps Alicia enter the canvas, both I think to see if it will help Alicia grieve, but also because I think she's trying to help Alicia feel like she has some control and choice, which is maybe something that Clea hasn't always felt. Clea is the type of person who harbors strong emotions, but doesn't want to show weakness. She carries her burdens alone because she has to be strong. Verso's death is probably just one example of how the weight has shifted on Clea, how she has been the one to assume responsibility. So she does what she knows. She isolates herself and hides her emotions, because that is what she has done her entire life. Her song Clea sheds a little bit of light into her childhood. Google Translate is a little confusing, but based on this interpretation made by Arasuni on Reddit, Clea's song speaks of how Verso gets embraced when he's sad, but Clea gets ordered around by Aline. The exact translation is unknown, but it seems like it paints a picture of Clea being treated harsher than her two siblings. The other song that speaks about Clea and the many faces of the Desandra family also speaks of a Clea who is mournful and just fine alone. And the interpretations of these songs don't have literal translations, as they use several languages and a made-up one as well, so it's a little confusing, but both songs about Clea seem to depict someone who is very sad and someone who is alone. But most interestingly, it seems to depict that Clea was treated differently than her other siblings, which is often how it goes for older siblings, especially when the eldest is a big sister. The oldest child, especially if it's a young girl, are often put into positions where they take on more responsibilities after their parents have more children. They have to grow up faster. They feel a sense of responsibility for their siblings and their entire family. They are often perfectionist, constantly trying to meet or exceed expectations placed on them. They are ambitious, high achievers, and can be competitive and impatient. These aren't official clinical syndromes, these are just sometimes present in older siblings, and all of these seem to reflect Clea's writing. Clea is essentially a young woman who had to grow up too quickly for whatever reason, and it has made her more cold and more calculating, but it also added immense pressure on her and how she feels responsible for her family. Clea sees Verso's death as her own failure to protect her family. She is not responsible for Verso's death, and yet, this happening to her family, her not seeing the Riders' attack coming, her not being able to prevent Verso's death, I'm sure she sees each one of these as a personal failure. So while she is angry at the entire situation, she is also angry at herself. She holds all of this within her, feeling like it's her responsibility to handle it, instead of sharing the weight with her family. She doesn't want to burden those around her, and I also think she doesn't trust that they can help her. She believes she must do everything alone, probably because she doesn't think of her family as reliable, which they've really shown not to be, but also because it would be a failure to Clea for her to have to ask for help. Her cold, strong personality, with a very soft emotional inside, also reminds me of Francois. Francois, I believe, was Clea's creation. And I think I remember being able to hear a little bit of Clea's song playing while we meet Francois. The two are absolutely connected. A turtle who didn't leave his spot, who would always be there when she needed him. But he also mirrored her personality. Angry, cold, but ultimately, he still loved those around him. Like Clea, he also only cried when he was alone. But from those tears was a deep pain, because Francois, just like Clea, may seem devoid of emotion on the outside. There is a storm brewing within. Clea is angry. She is angry at her dead brother for choosing to save Alicia at the cost of his own life. She is angry at Alicia for trusting the Riders who used her to start the fire. She is mad at her mother for escaping into the canvas and ignoring her family. She is angry at her father for going after her mother and leaving her behind. She is angry for being angry. Clea is a woman who has been left to shoulder the weight of the entire family. She is the only one left. Alicia has turned into a shell of a person, and she's also a child. The real people Clea needed help from are gone inside the canvas, so Clea is left alone. Alone with the reason why her brother is gone, and alone with the Riders. Renoir speaks of Clea fighting her solitary war, and it's that. She alone is trying to figure out what happened and is trying to prevent more conflict. And also, Clea is trying to get revenge. She has directed her own grief and anger at the Riders, at the real people who caused the fire. This is how she is handling her grief. People forget that Clea and Verso were the closest. They built that world within Verso's canvas together. They played there together and grew up together, while Alicia was reading her books. Francois and Esquier show us how connected to this world that Clea was. Those within the painting miss Clea. And the faceless little boy of Little Boy Verso talks about his many happy memories here, how much fun he had with his sister. The canvas meant more to Clea than the rest of the family, because she is the one who shared that world with Verso. It's her memories too that they're destroying, and it's also her world that they're breaking. But Clea knows that to save her family, she must let go of the canvas. She is pragmatic in her approach, which is probably how Clea has always had to be, her entire life. I think she is also resentful. Having to grow up so fast for whatever reason makes you resentful. We don't know much about her childhood, but we did see her parents had disagreements and conflict. And we did see Verso trying to find comfort within the painting. So what did Clea see that made her this way? Art is most often a self-portrait, a reflection of who we are, what we feel, and it shows something about who we are. So, why did Clea paint what she painted? While Verso's room is filled with trains and gestrels and innocent creations, Clea's creations are much more defined and crafted. But there's something about the way that they seem almost sinister that I find fascinating. Why did she create dolls with nails in them? Why did she create creatures that are genuinely scary? I think it speaks to Clea's hidden emotions. It's her resentment, her jealousy, and her anger manifesting through her art. Where Verso was just happily creating and finding comfort, Clea was reflecting herself in her sculptures and paintings. Her darkness came through. What did Clea see and experience as a child? And did growing up knowing she wasn't the favorite add to her resentment? Alicia thought Verso was Renoir's favorite, and Verso thought Alicia was Renoir's favorite. But no one thought Clea was the favorite. She gives the impression of someone who maybe had to fight for the spotlight, always reaching for new endeavors to outshine her parents' favorites. Maybe she didn't get enough attention, enough love or support. We know that Clea was jealous of Verso in some way. The faceless boy talks about the lampmaster and how Clea painted her spite into the canvas, birthing a horror to plague his nights. The creature was painted with the stroke of fear, with jealousy twisting and love blinding, a creature to keep him awake. I think she created this for two reasons. She was jealous of the attention Verso got, and in true older sibling fashion, found a way to terrorize him. Because that's what older siblings do, but I think in her cold way, she thought she was also helping him, that this would help him get over his fears. It was a lesson, but it was also a sliver of her true feelings, of the jealousy she felt towards her siblings. I think this dynamic is very apparent when you look at how coddled Alicia seems to be by her father, and how adored Verso was by his mother. Would Aline go into one of Clea's canvases to be with her if she died? Would Renoir be as soft with Clea like he was with Alicia? I think she knows the answer to both of these questions. Do all of these excuse Clea's cruelness towards her sister? No, but it does explain why she is the way that she is. Clea is just as wrong and as broken as the rest of the family. She's just better at hiding it. The story of Clair Obscur is about the broken Descendre family. And not only are they broken as an actual family, but each individual one of them is also broken. But for Clea, she directs them at herself, but also outward. She finds a purpose and tries to muffle her emotions. Some people see Clea as being completely moved on, but I'd say she hasn't really moved on at all. She has changed every one of her emotions into anger instead. She's mad at Alicia, and while Alicia is just a child and shouldn't be blamed, it doesn't change the situation of what happened. And Alicia is part of what happened, so Clea resents her for it. She tells Alicia that she doesn't know if she'd make the same decision that Verso made. But she also hates and loves her brother for what he did. I understand why people view Clea as cruel, but I think Renoir's perspective into her is the most accurate. Renoir's accents are his interpretations of his family members, and Clea's is the most revealing. Painted as a large, simple creature with a massive city on her back, he titles it Hauler because that is what Clea does. She puts the weight of everyone else on her back. She carries her family when they cannot carry themselves. And to be able to carry such a heavy burden, she has to stifle herself. I think the way that she's holding up the city at her own expense is obvious in its design. Her clothes are worn and tattered. Her arms are scarred. And she's probably in pain carrying the city on her back that's causing her to hunch over. But Renoir is recognizing how Clea suffers and endures for others, and how she shoulders the weight of everyone else, even if it hurts her to do so. This is why Clea doesn't cry or show strong emotions. She is in control because she has to be. So she suppresses her emotions, turning them into something she can control. She gives her emotions purpose. People view what she did to Painted Clea and the Axon as these offensive crimes, but Renoir painted Clea in a way that depicted a truth about herself that she didn't like to see. Her mother did the same. Does Clea like the way her family sees, or does Clea not like that her family sees through her? And these portraits reveal truths about herself that she doesn't like to confront. I think it's both. I think she wants to be in control of herself, including how other people view her. And I also think these insights into who she is might have been too revealing for Clea to handle. So she got rid of them both. She is able to do this because she doesn't see the creations within the painting as real. So she uses Painted Clea and Simon to her whim. I think she must also feel a little bit of vindication using Aline's creation against Aline. Like I said, I think that Clea has a lot of resentment and anger towards her family. And while she will never actually say it, it reveals itself in the little things that she does. I also can't imagine how upsetting it was to see Painted Clea have a whole life with her family inside the canvas, but to also have a lover and this whole other idealized version of herself. A copy of Clea painted as how her mother wanted her to be, living this whole life alongside her brother, who she will never get to see again. We always talk about the experiences of the Desandre family, but would this not be confusing and ultimately upsetting for a woman who wants to be in control of herself? Would it not be upsetting to see this painted clone of yourself, living a whole life alongside a brother that you grew up with, except none of it is real? Would it not be upsetting to see the mother who discarded you, to live alongside her depiction of you, instead of who you really are? Why is Clea not allowed to feel towards her family's actions within the painting, but also how they treat her? Of course, all of this upsets Clea. Clea's actions don't surprise me at all. What does surprise me is how people act like Clea doesn't care about her family at all, when in fact, everything she does is for them. They may not realize it or appreciate it, but it's true. Maëlle is also not surprised at Clea's actions either. When speaking to Verso, she says that Clea probably hasn't been home much, since knowing her, she's probably hunting down the writers. She also says that she barely saw Clea because she took Verso's death very personally. The entire family did, but Maëlle knows that Clea especially did. And Clea hiding herself, keeping away from her family so that she doesn't show her emotions, is exactly what I would expect from her. She was feeling all of these emotions while also feeling the weight of not being able to do something about it, and probably because Clea and Verso were so close. Verso's death probably hit her the most. People think Clea isn't suffering and isn't grieving, but even Maëlle recognizes Clea's grief, because Clea is absolutely grieving. It's just become anger and vengeance at this point. Clea may be in control of her emotions, but she's not actually in control. She's just essentially rerouting them, redirecting them, and not really addressing them. But I think this is part of why Clea is such a successful artist. She reminds me of artists who approach their work very methodically. It's a skill more than a medium. Her art progresses because her skill is why she paints, not necessarily for the emotional release or expression of feeling, which comes secondary to the actual process. While I'm sure she does those to an extent, I think the most important aspect of creating for Clea is skill, growth, and technique. She paints because she is chasing perfection. And I think with that type of methodical approach to art, you're able to quickly abandon one piece and move on to the next. This is how I see Clea. She isn't as connected to her creations as she is the process of creating them. The people in the canvas world aren't real because she can separate herself from her creations. She must move on to the next one. She still grew up loving this world though, the one that she created with her brother. And I'm sure watching it be destroyed angers her greatly. But her cold approach means that she can separate herself from it. And she knows that they have to die for her family to live. So she will use them and kill them if it means the safety of her family. The people of Lumiere are sentient with lives of their own, and Clea has caused them plenty of harm. Nothing really excuses what she's done, but it's understandable that when saving her family is the ultimate goal, nothing else matters to her. To Clea, the people of Lumiere and the canvas world can't matter because they're standing between her and her family. I also think Clea views the canvas as a thing of the past. She grew up and moved on from her old toys. Francois misses Clea because she left him behind like a boxed-up old toy. This was her childhood, but her childhood is no more. There's a certain level of detachment that she already has from it. She's ready to move on and to create something better, something more refined, something with more skill, which is how she views the Nevrons. Clea created all the Nevrons except for the one on the Axon Islands. They were created to kill the people of Lumiere to help keep the Chroma from Aline. They were created to help Renoir to free her family. But I wonder how she feels, having to create something like that. Did she feel sad creating something that was so hostile and violent that would destroy the world that she painted as a child? Is that why they're so beautiful and unique? Because she just can't help herself? Is this how she imagined her skill would be used for violence? Or does Clea revel that her creations are so powerful that they can be part of something that will eject her family from the canvas? Is there a part of her that is happy that her skills can be used like this? Is it both? All of the Nevrons add to Clea's character, but it's the white ones that tell us the most about their mistress. There is a partially finished white Nevron in the Frozen Hearts on a table. This shows us her work in progress, but it's also something that she left abandoned, which would be the case for any Nevrons that weren't completely finished, that weren't perfect. This door leads to Clea's atelier, but being the perfectionist that she is, eventually her white Nevrons would be discarded and forgotten, rejected by their creator for not being perfect. Their color was never finished, thus their purpose was also not given. The white Nevrons vary with their personalities, but they all share one thing in common. They are not actively hostile unless you provoke them. They're peaceful and they're all different. The jar wants a light. The Demonier just wants its mind balloon. The Chalier wants to die while it's still in control of its life. The small Bourgeon wants to grow and be with its mistress and is thankful for help. Hexka wants to grow and be strong. They want to shine, they want a purpose, they want to be in control, they want to grow. Their many traits are just traits reflective of Clea. Most interesting is Benessure. It says grief is not a burden that needs to be carried alone. Still, it has broken the minds of many, with profound consequences. Such a beautiful painting, tainted by suffering. Would that they could go back to those days. This is a reflection of Clea, but also the entire Desandra family. Troubadour is a white Nevron that seems to also reflect regret. It says, I don't want to kill my friends. I just wanted to play with them. Even when I managed to play a note right, I messed up right after. Can you believe it? I'm expected to use my instrument to kill and I'm angry. I cannot play. I will never play again. I think Troubadour is a reflection of how Clea hurts those around her, without realizing or meaning to. Her mistakes hurt those that she loves. I also think this reflects her frustration at always chasing perfection. She's frustrated with her creation, she's angry, she doesn't want to continue. But eventually she will, because that is how perfection works. You keep chasing the unobtainable. Some of the other Nevrons also provide a darker insight into Clea. Clea wants to die, with its new duty being to end its own existence. The Portier was unfinished and you can help it be whole, but it views itself as having a damned soul, and it feels that it's condemned in this state. It's ready to die. These are very sad reflections of parts of Clea. We also see in the Frozen Hearts the White Nevron here is a Danisu's teacher, and this Nevron simply wants to teach you to dance, but she also reveals that she doesn't think that everyone can achieve the same thing. This is someone who feels doubt. I think all of these reflections into Clea are extremely sad, and her imperfections and her failures reveal the truth of who she is. After you help all of the White Nevrons, you come to the end of the quest. Here you meet Blanche, who I'm going to call White. But White seems offended on Clea's behalf, that her mother would dare claim ownership of this painting, when it was truly Verso and Clea who painted this world. White also reveals their purpose. We who are her creations, we share the same duty, to hasten a resolution to their conflict by removing their powers of destruction, by keeping Chroma from their grasp. White was also given another purpose, to erase the unfinished White Nevrons, to erase Clea's failures, as they are proof of Clea's work that is imperfect. But White was created the same, and thus could not erase the other White Nevrons. This duty was too cruel. Now, because of the expedition showing the Nevrons mercy and kindness, now White can have hope. I really think these White Nevrons give us a very good insight into Clea. They show all the things that she's trying to hide, the feelings that she's trying to erase, the parts of her that she sees that are flawed. These are imperfect, neglected, and lost Nevrons. They don't have duties and purpose, and thus many of them see no purpose in life. Clea is duty-bound, and with no real purpose. Its duty is to simply stop existing. We also meet Nevrons who are remorseful at their actions. We meet Nevrons who want to teach others to become perfect. Some simply want to hold their little mind balloon and be happy. Some want to bring light and shine where there is darkness. They want to grow big and strong. They are just looking for purpose and growth. And I think that represents Clea pretty well. She is a perfectionist, and perfectionists are always chasing perfection, which is unobtainable, but they still try. They learn and grow and chase that advancement, and that's how Clea is. She is determined. And also, I think, like the White Nevrons, they also represent how Clea feels neglected. She ironically inflicted the same feelings on them. But just like these little White Nevrons who are always alone when we find them, Clea wears her burdens alone just like them. She feels different, neglected, and always searching for something. She shoulders her grief, and while these Nevrons reflect how much being neglected hurts, White hurts most of all. And like White, Clea, if she too were to find others like herself, I think she would have complicated feelings just like White. The White Nevrons are a mirror into her own soul. Maybe that's also why she wants them destroyed. Not only are they her failures, but they reveal parts of Clea she doesn't want anyone to see, which is the exact same situation as both the Axon and her mother's portrait. Clea doesn't want anyone defining her or revealing truths about who she is. And the White Nevrons tell us one big truth about Clea. She makes mistakes. She is not perfect and she has flaws. I think this realization and acceptance is one of Clea's biggest fears. I think Clea is very misunderstood, but I think her story is just as sad as everyone else's. And it's also real. I know a Clea. My big sister is literally Clea. She took on the weight after my brother and myself were born. She filled in the gaps that my parents left. She taught me things, influenced me, and helped me grow just like Clea. My sister was sometimes an asshole, but she was also fierce and dedicated in her love. She put our family first. She's curt and she's blunt, but man, does she fucking love me and my family. And she would do anything for us, even at the cost of herself, just like Clea. I think that's why I'm also so defensive of people's interpretations of Clea. She is not one-dimensional and she isn't just cruel and cold. I see my sister in her. A young woman who was forced to grow up too quickly, who assumed the responsibilities of taking care of her family at a young age, who keeps everything she feels tight to her chest because she only knows shouldering her own weight so that she doesn't burden others. I see someone who feels alone, but I also see someone who has remained absolutely devoted to her family. I actually realized through this script that my siblings and I are very similar to Clea Verso and Mael. The Desandra family to me feels so real because I can really see my own family in them, and I have a soft spot for all of them. Clea is the most like my real sister. And I don't think you truly understand someone like Clea until you've been on the receiving end of their love. It looks different. Instead of words and affections, it's actions and dedication. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is not just about grief. It's about the love that this family has for one another, in every world, and how much that love can hurt ourselves, but also those that we love. Love is a beautiful, powerful thing, and it's also something that can drive us mad with grief, or put us in dangerous situations. Love is why we fight. It's why we create, and it's why we live. I also think if you really want to know about Clea, you have to put in the work. You have to find and help all of her white nevrons. You have to look into her room, listen to her song. You have to find all of the things that she has hidden about herself, because that's exactly the type of person that she is. She doesn't want anyone seeing her flaws or the truth. But that's also why it makes her the most interesting. I think a lot of people are going to go through the game without realizing all the subtle little clues and hints about who Clea really is. But let me know what you think. This is just my interpretation of who Clea is as a character. Someone who I see who is deeply flawed, but is also really struggling with her inner voice. She is sad, angry, grieving, mad, vengeful, but she's also so lonely. And I am totally biased because, like I said, my sister is basically literally Clea. So maybe I was a little bit too soft on her, but I think once you look at everything that involves Clea, all of the hints and clues, you see a larger painted picture of just someone who is really sad and is doing a really good job at hiding it. I think Clea is also the most hated character of Clair Obscur, so maybe my insight gave you a little bit to think about. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my channel members. Thank you to my Patreon subscribers. Thank you all so much for your support. It's because of you that I can continue to make more videos. And if you want more videos like this, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all of that cheesy stuff that I hate promoting, because I do plan on making more of these. I want to cover each character from Clair Obscur Expedition 33 in the future. Anyways, thank you guys, and see you next time.